Welcome back to my channel, Christopher Taylor, Sovereign Harmony. So, I tried to do a video here just a couple of minutes ago and it cut off on me, so I'm going to start all over. That's fine. If you'll notice, I have a different background today. I'm out of town. I'm back to my place of birth, Worcester, Massachusetts, doing a video. And so typically I'm in San Diego. I'll be back in San Diego tomorrow, which is nice. I get to see some sunshine. It's been a little bit gloomy, cloudy, gray, kind of chilly over here in Massachusetts these last few days. So looking forward to get back to some sunshine. But I wanted to update everyone on what's happening, especially as we move through this fall and into 2017. I talked about my last couple of videos about adjusting for our missions. That was a couple of videos ago. So the whole period of Mercury retrograde in Virgo coincided with a couple of eclipses. One was a solar eclipse in Virgo, one a lunar eclipse in Pisces, and that whole period, in my opinion, being this adjustment phase. So we're getting ready to get on our missions with certain partnerships that were aligned with like-minded individuals, and those partnerships can only exist if we're in our authentic form, our sovereign individuality, and we're not eclipsing that or being dominated or dominating others in relationship, right? And so this whole period, the way I see it, has been adjusting ourselves, adjusting our daily realities, our daily work, what we do day to day, in whether or not it reflects who we actually are. And so a lot of us in these last couple of months, like say late August, right on through September, adjusting potentially, what we do for work, for example, to better reflect who we are. Like for example, I just recently left a job that was done a certain way to open up an opportunity that's a little more scary, but it's also a little more aligned with who I am as an individual, okay? And so the theme this week, generally speaking, with Mercury coming out of its shadow, so Mercury's coming out of its shadow from that retrograde this week, I think Wednesday or Thursday. Today's Tuesday, October 4th, just to kind of align you with where we're at. So in a couple of days, Mercury is going to be leaving the shadow, and so our adjustment period is over. We're ready. We just had the new moon in Libra on Friday the 30th, and that kind of kick-started Jupiter's entrance into Libra a few days before that, about a week or so, a couple weeks before that, okay? And so Jupiter's in Libra. It's going to be in Libra till October 2017, so over a year, and it's a time of expanding partnership, expanding, right partnership, etc. And so finding balance is a very important key to this period. And so again, not being dominated, not dominating. And that's the key with balance and what Libra energy is all about. And so with the new moon kicking off Jupiter in Libra, this Mercury is exiting its shadow this week. We have this time of finally saying, all right, we're ready to join. We're ready to join forces on our mission, whatever our specific mission is. And this week specifically is actually a pretty energy charged week with Mars in Capricorn squaring Jupiter in Libra. So Jupiter gets its kind of send off with the new moon last Friday, and this week Mars is kind of tugging it in another direction, saying, hey, let's kind of play over here. Mars is a very exuberant energy as it is. In Capricorn, it's very focused, okay? But it's calling over to Jupiter in Libra, and it's about sort of joining forces to get to work in a very exuberant way. And so it's a week of diving in, all in or nothing. A lot of courage is necessary this week, for sure. In my personal life, for sure. Again, jumping into a new job where I don't have that same foundational base of income that I had in my old job, but I get to be treated like an adult, an individual, which is nice. No more of this, I kind of outgrew this whole idea of, being told where to go, what to do, and how to do it kind of thing. And so this is a nice new experiment for me. I'm ready for it, and it's just a little bit different way of earning money, commission only, which is interesting. But so a lot of us are having these kind of transitions happening right now, but this week is a really good week to jump into something that has maybe scared you up until now, that you want to do, and it could have to do with partnership. So in this case, it's a new partnership with how I interact as on a professional level. But some people, it could be jumping into a partnership that can steamroll into a working relationship, etc. That's an energy of this week too. And so whatever it is, like this week is basically calling us to be a little more courageous than we would normally be, because things will have a better chance of working out in this energy. But overdoing it is obviously the only, the only possible negative side effect of this is overdoing it. But be sure to overdo more than you usually do, just not overdo completely. That's the key in the balance. Again, Jupiter and Libra. So find that balance between doing more than you would normally, but not too much. Okay. Anyway, so that's kind of what's happening right now with this energy. As we roll through the fall with this Jupiter and Libra energy, it will start forming some aspects with Saturn in Sagittarius, a sextile to Saturn in Sagittarius. It'll square Pluto in Capricorn, and it will oppose Uranus in Aries. So all three of those will be pretty big aspects from around the holidays, say November, December of this year, right on through the end of next summer, which would be like September-ish of next summer, okay? And so this is going to be a time of stable, foundations for relationships that are helping us into our future and us helping them, vice versa, kind of a mutual sense of being in mission with others. That square to Pluto is really this kind of, going beyond your comfort zone in a way, and a new foundation for, what we consider okay and not okay for our own experiences. And that opposition to Uranus is really going to be a reality check with regards to our individual sovereignty. This idea that started to birth in us in 2010 when Uranus entered Aries. It joined Jupiter at that point. And so in 2010, 2011, we were really kind of birthing this new sense of identity in how we're separate from, in a way that, whatever our unique contribution is to the world as an individual, as a sovereign being. And so that's what that Jupiter, Uranus in Aries energy was all about. The opposition here is kind of the culmination of what has been created in the last 6 to 7 years. And so we'll see that by the end of the summer of 2017, where are we at now that we have, now that we know who we are, now that we're putting ourselves out there, what kind of relationships do we have, Jupiter and Libra, that reflect that support that individuality? Because that's the important thing. A lot of us struggle with relationships in that we either get dominated or we dominate, and it's really hard to find a balance. So it's either you stay single and you do your thing, or if you get in a relationship, you have to kind of give up your own sense of self. So that's on a personal level, obviously, but that can happen on a professional level too, where you think, well, if I'm working for someone, that means I give up a certain part of myself, where it's actually possible to work for someone, but also be an individual, right? Just like it's possible to be in a relationship and also be an individual and not adhere to certain expectations, okay? And so that's the energy we're getting to by the end of the summer, is this sense of, on a personal level, relating in a way that reflects our authenticity and that allows for it rather than eclipses it or detaches from it. On a global level, on a more larger scale, because I want to talk about the election and things changing in the next couple of years, etc. But how this reflects in the global level over the next year, probably more opportunities for peace with Jupiter in Libra. I think that Jupiter, especially that sextile to Saturn, that really suggests potential for treaties of certain kinds and peace treaties, etc. But the opposition to Uranus and that square to Pluto suggests there could be some big changes. I think there's going to be some big changes in terms of boundaries of nations and entities of governance. So an example of this, I think we had a preview, was the Brexit. So Britain exiting the United Kingdom. Britain exiting the European Union. Sorry about that. And so that, that in effect, and there was also, there was, what I meant to say was there was dissension within the United Kingdom as far as the different nations not wanting to exit. Britain exited, etc. So it was like this big, what seemed to be a mess. And we were all told in the media that it was going to lead to a disaster, etc. But instead, it actually didn't lead to any disasters. So it was evidence or proof that there are ways to reorganize, and still be functional, right? And I think we're going to see a lot of that reorganization this year. Quick reorganizations which require new ways of harmonizing with each other. And so new treaties have to come online and new agreements, etc. So it's this sense of a lot of rapid changes in boundaries and then agreements because of that. right? And so that feels like a big energy, and that I think it's going to happen in terms of corporations too. Any big entities are going to start reorganizing in new ways of interacting. You're going to be part of that, okay? Other big energies kind of happening on the horizon here in October, actually right now, and it'll peak I think on the 8th. So today's the 4th, so in a few days, Saturn is squaring the moon's nodes. So the moon's nodes right now, Pisces south node, Virgo north node. So south node has to do with what we're releasing and leaving. North node is what we're approaching and bringing in. And so we're bringing in more Virgo. We're releasing that Pisces. Saturn and Sagittarius squaring that. What it's suggesting is this is a kind of moment of truth, a moment to focus our direction with reality. So we're coming into reality, letting go of any fantasies, right? But we're also incorporating our dreams into our reality, okay? And that's been a big theme of this Saturn-Neptune square going back to the fall of 2015. It's been merging dreams with reality. And so we have Saturn squaring these nodes here in October, and in November we have Neptune coming up to the south node in Pisces. And so this is really the finishing capstone of that Saturn-Neptune square that goes back to 2015. And so this whole period of trying to find a way to merge our reality with our dreams is coming into this fruition here in October, November. And it really has to do with strapping into where we're headed with reality, letting go of the fantasy, but bringing in the part of the dream that can work. And then the Neptune on the south node on a personal level has a lot to do with just the final release. Finally, letting go of what, in the final realizations. And I think this is going to be reflective with the election coming up in November on a collective level. That Neptune South Node conjunction in Pisces is going to happen pretty much, it's going to start right around the election day, and it's going to linger for a couple of weeks. I think what this really represents is this energy, this general energy of people kind of realizing, wow, it's rigged. It's rigged, that our choices don't matter, that it doesn't matter who you vote for, that we don't have a vote. And so I'll give you my sense of the election in just a second. But what I think is there's going to be this sort of like release of the disillusionment. And so this final realization, like, wow, if we want a system that works for us, we're going to have to create a new system. And this sense of releasing of this current system and saying it just doesn't work anymore. And I see that as the sort of general energy of November. The sense that like the country and the world are starting to realize like there's got to be some big changes if you actually want something to happen for us, right? So going back to the more collective look at this energy and the election itself. So I want to talk about, before I specifically talk about the election, just the general changes that we've been in and that we're heading toward. Two major aspects, one being Pluto in Capricorn, the other being Regulus, which is a fixed star in Virgo, okay? And so we'll start with Pluto in Capricorn. We'll get to Regulus and Virgo in just a second, and how that relates to the election and everything else. So Pluto in Capricorn, so Pluto takes 248 years to go around the zodiac once. So no human actually ever gets a chance to, experience Pluto in the same place it was in the zodiac when they were born, because they don't live 248 years. But a nation can. And so we have the United States, which is actually coming up on its Pluto return, where Pluto was, when it was born, the Declaration of Independence in 1776. And what I want to talk about is the last couple of trips of Pluto through Capricorn, just to give you a sense of what happens when this occurs. So Pluto was in Capricorn in the early 1500s. It was in Capricorn again in 1762 to 1778, so that 16-year period. And now it's in Capricorn right now from 2008 to 2024. And so this is a 16-year period within which we are halfway. We are at the halfway point of Pluto in Capricorn this time. And so every time Pluto's in Capricorn, Pluto has to do with deep transformation. Capricorn has to do with governing laws, collective organization in general. And so every time Pluto goes through Capricorn, there's a complete transformation of collective organization, to put it simply, which is just another way to say complete transformation in government, or whatever it is that rules society. And in the early 1500s, this was a complete breakdown and transformation of what had ruled the majority of society, especially in Europe, for 1500 years, and that was Christianity. And so it went from Christianity as one thing to broken down into Protestant denominations. And that was when Martin Luther pinned the note on the door in the early 1500s when Pluto was in Capricorn. And it was a start of what has rippled out for 500 years of something that has not quit. It's not like it's gone back and said, oh, guess what, we're all going to wrap Christianity back into one box again. No, it began then, it transformed, and it transformed forever. Okay? That's another key with Pluto and Capricorn, is that transformation lasts forever. It is permanent. In 1762 to 1778, we had the build-up and then the creation of the American Revolution. Okay? And so the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. Pluto was in very late degrees of Capricorn, like 28 degrees Capricorn, something like that. And during that time, there was a complete transformation from this idea of monarchies ruling different nations. You know, every nation had a king and a queen, and they said what you did and everything else. And then there was this idea of liberty that came up, and this idea of organizing ourselves in a different way. And while on paper it was created then, and you could argue, certainly in 2016, that perhaps 240 years later, it's not really happening, and I would agree with that. But the idea was birthed at least, and that idea led to more ideas of liberty and democracy, and we've had nothing but a breakdown of monarchies since then. So it really, in the last 240 years, has been a complete breakdown of the monarchy system of governance, and at least attempts at liberty and democracy and whatnot. What we have now, 2008 to 2024, in my opinion, is a complete breakdown of what rules the world now, which is basically global corporations that control all the nations that are all kind of in the same party or in the same club, kind of trying to rule the world's resources, etc. And so what we have in the first 8 years of this, in the last 8 years since 2008, is a complete realization on a global level of what's happening, that corporate government coalition on a global level, and how it controls the world, and how income and money is very unequal and will continue to be under that kind of structure. The next 8 years, we're going to see the complete breakdown and transformation of that into something more functional, especially 2020 to 2025. I think we're going to see a major shift in the United States itself, especially 2022, 2023, right in the middle of that 20 to 2025. That is when Pluto returns to where it was when the U.S. was born. And so this is going to be a major destruction or transformation of the U.S. And so destruction doesn't have to be in the most negative sense, but destruction in terms of how it has operated until this point. Okay? And that can be a very positive thing, because if you're familiar with the history of, the American Revolution and whatnot, I mean, the banks, the private banks came in right away because the colonies were ravaged, and so the United States already started off on the wrong foot when it comes to monetary policy and finance. They tried to get off the bank, but since 1913, we've been back on the Federal Reserve system. So this is something that's going to break down completely, the private banking systems owning nations and stuff like that. In my opinion, in the next, say, 8 to 10 years, we'll see the complete breakdown of that. And so there'll be no more setting of interest rates from the Fed or this and that. This is a private institution setting the rates. So this whole idea is going to collapse, and we'll have new ideas coming forward. So we're in it. We're in a pretty major transformation. The other major aspect I want to talk about, because this just had to relate to the idea that yes, we're ready for a breakdown of the political system with Pluto and Capricorn, and I think we'll see it because of the release of disillusionment that'll happen in November. I think by 2020, which is again when Pluto will be in Capricorn, and also Jupiter and Saturn are going to join Pluto, it's going to be the beginning of the end of the political system as we know it. So I think if the ruling elite try to put two puppets in front of us and say, oh, here are your choices again, despite popular demand for other candidates, like for example in 2016 we had Bernie, who I'm not necessarily a supporter, but he was obviously more popular than Hillary, but couldn't get in to the candidacy because of what we're told was the count of the votes, right? And so I think in 2020 we're going to see a total non-compliance of the general populace to the old system, and so it's going to be the beginning of the end of that breakdown, because we're going to see, I think, in my opinion, we'll get there in a second, as far as who's going to win this election, and what that's going to mean for the next 4 years, etc., and why it's going to be time in 2020 to really break things down and change things. But Regulus in Virgo, the other big major aspect. So Regulus in Virgo, Regulus takes about 2,000 plus years to go around the zodiac. So it's in one sign it takes 2,000 plus years to go through one sign of the zodiac. It takes about 25,000 years to go around the entire zodiac. So when it's in a sign, it's in there for a while. Regulus was in Leo from about the beginning of the Roman Empire till right about 2011, 2012. Okay, it's in Virgo now for the last few years. It'll be there for another 2,000 plus years. So we better get used to it, right? But what Regulus deals with is power structures. And so when Regulus was in Leo, it was power structured according to Leonian vibration or energy. And Leo is a very masculine dominated, might is right, you either win or you lose, and the winner, the winners win at the expense of the losers. It's a very domineering, imbalanced kind of energy. Okay, it obviously has its attributes too, and this is like things like fame, for example, was huge, has been huge with Regulus in Leo up until 2011, and it's lingering. Obviously, don't get me wrong, it's lingering. Every one of us that are alive, unless you're 4 years old or younger, has Regulus in Leo as sort of an energy that you were born with, right? And so it's going to linger, but it's a dying energy, is the point. But this idea of how to rule nations, how to organize people, how power is structured in a Leo way is dying, okay? And so there's no way to replug into that. And so I like to use the analogy of a cell phone. If you think of us all as cell phones that need a charge, right? When we run out of charge, we have to charge back in, and the old energy was Regulus in Leo. And so that energy was, someone like Donald Trump, for example, who lived his whole life from that energy of, capitalizing on the losses of others for his own gains and things like that, or anyone that kind of can do that. It was also, a time when things like sports and music rose people to heights of fame that was very imbalanced from the fans that worshiped them, etc. And so this is all very Regulus in Leo. And as we get into Regulus in Virgo, the energy is much more about power in the pieces. Virgo is about each individual piece. So power with regards to your individual contribution or piece. It's a more common sense approach to power. So what makes sense is better or more functional, right? It's also, more feminine based. And so there's an appreciation for the resources, like nature as a source of your resources, taking care of that being important, and in yielding more power, etc. And so the more we plug into that or create systems according to that energy, the more it's going to work. The more we try to create systems according to old Regulus and Leo energy, the more things are going to fail. Okay, and so that's just where we're at. We have to kind of accept, where we're at in this phase of change. And so with Regulus in Leo up until 2011, it was in the 29th degree of Leo for the last 70 years of that. So late 1930s, right up until 2011. The 29th degree of any sign is the most intense expression of that energy. So we saw the most intense expression of Regulus in Leo from the late 1930s up until recently. And so that was the, where Hitler, who went from basically saving Germany up until the mid 1930s to getting on meth and making bad decisions, and that the shadow side of love for your ethnic identity is hatred for ethnic identities that are not you. And so that turning into what we saw essentially there. And so that the ills of nationalism in general, when you identify with either ethnically or geographically or whatever, the enemy becomes anything that is not you, right? And that's kind of the downside of nationalism in general. But it's very Regulus in Leo. Again, it's winning at the expense of others, right? And so we can see that there. We can see the atomic bomb coming into play there. Think about that. I mean, now we're talking about whoever has the bombs has the power, right? And no one else can say boo, because you can blow them up and kill them in one push of a button. And so that's very Regulus in Leo. So again, 29th degree of Leo, intense expression of Regulus in Leo. We had the rise of, again, like I said before, of fame. So like sports figures who didn't make that much more money than other people back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. Come the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, start getting huge imbalances between the sports figures and the people worshiping them. Same thing with acting, right? The actors started getting paid millions and millions for a movie when, 50, 60 years ago, it wasn't that case, okay? So there's this explosion of imbalance that happened with Regulus in the 29th degree of Leo. But just because we were all born during the Regulus in the 29th degree of Leo, and that's all we've seen, doesn't mean that is where we're headed, because we're done with that. And we're done with it. It will never be back. We cannot plug into that ever again in our lifetimes. What we can plug into is Regulus and Virgo energy. And that's what we're seeing is, as these old systems collapse, and that Pluto and Capricorn is part of it, this idea that we're in a transition, they cannot be rebuilt again the same way. It's not possible. It's like you don't have the parts anymore. I like to think of an analogy like if you have an old car that has specific parts that aren't made anymore, once those parts go, your car is done, right? And so we can think of the old systems, these old systems that hold two puppets in front of us, and we were supposed to vote for them and think that our votes matter. That system isn't going to work anymore at a certain point, and we're getting to that point. And I think, like I said, in November we're going to see this recognition of that reality, and having to let go of the idea that we can actually use the system to have the system work for us. It isn't possible. And in 2020 to 2025, we'll start creating these systems to actually function for people again. But we'll get to that when we get to that. But the idea being is that we are switching into this new energy, and we're in a transition of, a great transformation, a permanent transformation at the same time of all of our systems. So our government systems, our medical systems, our energy systems, like utilities, how utilities work versus generating electricity on your own. So all of it is going to be permanently transformed in the next 8 to 10 years. And the only way to build systems, like new medical systems, new monetary systems, new systems of any kind, is going to be with the Virgo energy as far as the structure of power goes. So no more Leo energy, no more imbalance, no more might is right, no more masculine dominance, etc. Because those systems just simply won't work anymore. It's interesting to note about the election specifically, so I'll talk about that. This year, I'm pretty much convinced that Hillary is chosen. She's going to be the president. There's kind of no two ways about it. So whether she gets in legitimately, i.e. voting, or whether there's voter fraud to get her in, she'll get in. And this is just because she's, part of the club. Like George Carlin once said, if it's a big club and you ain't in it. So it has nothing to do with gender. I think it would be great if we had a woman president that was, a legitimate representation of people and everything else. But that's not what we have with Hillary. I'm not suggesting that's what we have with Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter or a Hillary supporter. I think I represent the majority of people in that I don't support either of them. I think I support a new system in general. I think the old system is dead and we need a new system. But I think she's been chosen, she'll be put in. Trump is kind of, he's going to amp up the craziness over the next few weeks. We're only about 4 weeks out now, 4 or 5 weeks out from the election. He's going to amp up the craziness, and it's meant to make you vote for Hillary, in my opinion, and that's kind of what his role is. It's interesting that he's got so much support, and that has a lot to do with this Regulus shift from Leo to Virgo. And what I mean by that is, if you look at Trump's chart, and now if you're familiar with charts, the beginning of the chart is considered to be where the ascendant is. In other words, it's the point on the chart that is rising right at the eastern horizon. And so like in my chart, it's at 22 degrees Virgo, right? In Donald Trump's chart, it's at 29 degrees Leo. So we just talked about that. The Regulus being at 29 degrees Leo, which means Regulus essentially is rising in his chart. He has Regulus at 29 degrees Leo rising in his chart, which means he personifies Regulus in Leo. Not only Regulus in Leo, but Regulus in Leo in the 29th degree of it. So all the intense expressions of imbalance, masculine dominance, all of that energy is channeled through Donald Trump in a way. Okay? So he is a representation of the energy that I just talked about. That goes back to the beginning of the Roman Empire. Okay? So if you're questioning, how can people even see this? What his function is on a higher level, if you look at it from a spiritual level, in my opinion, he's sucking the poison out. He's reflecting the shadow side, all that stuff that's in people that is left over from that Regulus in Leo that we were all born in, you and me, unless you're 4 years old or younger. He's sucking the poison out, and he's showing it for what it is. He's feeding off of it, because like I said, you cannot plug into it anymore. The only way to plug into it is to take it from someone else. And so that's what Donald Trump is doing. He's taking it out of everyone else. And whereas Hillary, who doesn't have the same ability to connect to individuals, to humans, like Trump does. He knows how to connect to people. And so it goes both ways. So he can connect to them and he can pull from them as well. And that's what he's doing. He's living off of their Leo energy, which is then depleting by default. Because he's taking their energy, they don't have it anymore. So Trump supporters are really just pumping out the last bits of that Regulus in Leo in preparation for a transition to Regulus in Virgo kind of approaches to power and structure, etc. That we all have to do if we want to survive in the Regulus in Virgo, right? Which is actually much more geared for survival in an easier form than Regulus in Leo was. But in any case, so he's sucking out that poison, and Hillary, on the other hand, doesn't have the ability to do that. She struggles with connecting to humans. I mean, it's pretty obvious. And because of that, because she has no place to plug into that old energy and she's trying to be the old energy, she's getting sick. She's becoming ill. And we're going to see this a lot with anyone that refuses to plug in to Regulus and Virgo energy and they want to stick with Regulus and Leo, examples of power. We're going to see a lot of leaders starting to get sick. And the only way to get better would be to plug into the Virgo energy, to plug in, or to pull it off others, like Donald Trump is doing, okay? And so, but as you start to run out of it is the point. And so really what Trump is doing is accelerating this transition to Regulus and Virgo, even though he doesn't know he's doing it. And if anything, he's attempting to keep Regulus and Virgo in active, but it's not possible. It's kind of universally impossible is the point. And so we have to accept where we're at in this transition. So no big task, right? So anyway, that's my take on the election. So I think Hillary's going to get in. It's because she's chosen. Whether or not she's voted in doesn't matter. The disillusionment with Neptune on the South Node in Pisces in November, I think we're going to see a collective sense of if we want a new system, if we want to be represented, if we want our system to work for us, we need a new system. This system doesn't work. 2020 to 2025 is the end of the Pluto and Capricorn period. The permanent transition of all of our systems, our political, government, medical, money, energy, you name it, every system will be transformed. And going back to the beginning of the video, talking about our missions. What are these missions? In my opinion, a lot of us are joining with like-minded people for specific aspects of the changes in the world to get us through this transformation. And so I feel like I'm on a certain mission in terms of whatever it is, to help, and I'm joining forces with people that are like-minded, whether that's business partners, personal partners, whatever, to help with the transition. So there's no going back. There just isn't any going back. We can't go back to Regulus in Leo. It's running out. And Pluto going through Capricorn means we're going through a permanent transformation. So we might as well transform things permanently in a way that is functional according to the new energy of Regulus in Virgo. And that is what most of our missions, even if we're not conscious of it, actually has to do with, okay? Our missions have to do with ensuring that when everything collapses, because it's in the process of collapse, just like that old car where the parts don't exist for it anymore, when it breaks down, it breaks down. These systems are in the process of breakdown. They don't need to be overthrown necessarily. It can be peacefully, we can peacefully watch them break down and be ready to replace them. And so the next few years is about getting ourselves organized with like-minded folks on our missions with ideas ready to replace the old ideas when they break down. And we can already see the beginnings of it. We see things like Airbnb and Uber and Bitcoin and all these mechanisms of commerce, etc., that are emerging, okay, that have to do with the new energy, that are, and you can already see the reaction to it. The Regulus in Leo lingering energy wants to tax Airbnb as a hotel tax. They want to ban Uber from certain cities. The government wants to do this. But all those blockages are falling away. That's part of the old system. So we're seeing a new system emerge. We're seeing new systems emerge. And it's the right time for it. And as long as we create them with the right energy, we're going to be okay. And right now we're joining forces to get in line with doing that with each other. So know that you're important. You're an important piece of it. We all are. And just enjoy this ride as things unravel over the next decade, I think, especially. But take the next few years, and of course we'll talk more about that later. But right now, if you want to just focus on right now, where we're at in it, Jupiter and Libra, we're joining forces. Join forces, create balanced partnerships. That's the important thing to do now. Do not eclipse your sovereignty in partnership. Create balanced partnerships align with your work. And if we all do that, then when the systems fall, we'll be ready to just do what we got to do. Okay? So it's nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. It is what it is. Just focus on the joining of forces, focus on the harmony, focus on the balance, and it's all good. So thanks again for joining me. I'll see you next time in San Diego. And I'm getting a little chilly out here. It's freezing. My hands are like getting cold, like my jaw. I'm like hearing myself say the different words and they're hard to say. I guess I better get used to this chill because winter's coming. But anyway, we will see you on the flip side. Thanks again for joining me. Christopher Taylor, Sovereign Harmony. Until next time.